Welcome to the channel. In the annals of North American criminal history, there are names that evoke an aura of mystery and terror. Among them is that of Angel Maturino Resendiz, known as the Death Train Killer. His life and crimes have left a great mark on the collective conscience, spreading fear in communities along the US-Mexico border. If you want to know his story and his darkest secrets, this is your video. That said, let's begin. Angel Maturino Resendiz was born on August 1, 1959 in Izúcar de Matamoros, Puebla, 100 kilometers from Mexico City. As his mother, Virginia, tells us, from an early age, our protagonist was the victim of accidents and situations of violence unbecoming of such a young child. His mother also commented that her son was mentally handicapped due to a blow he suffered shortly after birth. In his childhood, Maturino was the victim of horrible abuse by some of his neighbors in his neighborhood. This led him to develop a series of paranoid disorders, and from a very young age, he would become a tremendously lonely person who escaped from reality by sniffing glue and engaging in antisocial behavior that would mark him for the rest of his life. In fact, throughout his existence, Maturino lived as a criminal and homeless, smuggling himself across the US-Mexico border. This led him to be deported on numerous occasions, and he was convicted of multiple crimes. He held various jobs, such as orange picker in Florida and tobacco harvester in Kentucky. In 1979, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for robbery and assault. After 6 years, he was released and deported back to Mexico. It is known that he had family in El Rodeo, Durango, where his partner Julieta Dominguez and their daughter lived. His siblings Luis, Jorge, and Manuela lived in Ciudad Juarez. In June 1986, Texas authorities arrested him for falsifying documents while attempting to re-enter the U.S. He was subsequently sentenced to 18 months in prison and banished to his home country. Although the string of crimes began in 1991, Maturino confessed to killing in 1986. His first victim was a homeless man, whom he shot and left his body in a nearby farmhouse. After his vague period in the country, his face reappeared in March 1989, under the pseudonym Resendiz Ramirez, when he faced trial on 16 charges, including illegal possession of weapons and falsification of public documents. On July 19, 1991, the body of 33-year-old Michael White was found in the garden of an abandoned house in Lexington, Kentucky. Maturino confessed to the crime in 2001. He claimed to have murdered White because he was a homosexual. Police concluded in April 2006 that he was indeed the one who murdered White, who was beaten to death with a hammer. He would not kill again until 1997, when he saw 21-year-old Christopher Meyer with his girlfriend walking along a railway track. He crept up on Christopher and then beat him to death, who died within seconds. His girlfriend was abused and beaten, but luckily survived the attack. Later that year, he would kill 18-year-old Jesse Howell and his partner Wendy. Their bodies were buried in a grave in Florida. In 1998, he murdered 81-year-old Leafy Mason and 39-year-old Claudia Benton. The latter was abused, stabbed, and bludgeoned in her own home. After these murders in such a short period of time, the FBI went into action and set up a special operation to catch the terrible criminal who was terrorizing the country. This operation, called Operation Train Stop, involved more than 200 volunteers from the United States, Canada, and Mexico. In fact, the authorities offered a reward of $120,000 or a green card to illegal immigrants if they provided the exact location of Maturino. He was for a time on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, sharing the billboard with terrorist Osama bin Laden. It took almost 7 months and 7 more murders before the police found the mysterious killer. On May 2nd, 1999, he broke into the home of the Cernick family in Texas, consisting of Norman Cernick and Karen Cernick. Both were beaten to death with a sledgehammer, and their bodies were discovered days later. On June 4th, 1999, Noemi Dominguez, a high school teacher, was beaten to death in her flat near the train tracks. 7 days later, police discovered her car on the International Bridge in Del Rio, Texas. His last murder occurred on June 15th of the same year, when he shot George Morber with a shotgun and then beat Carolyn Frederick, his wife, to death. His home was located only 90 meters from a railway track. Maturino, apart from killing the victims, also used to steal money and valuables from the homes, such as expensive jewelry, which he would then send to their relatives. In response to the panic in the homes near the train tracks where the murderer used to work, the television program America's Most Wanted broadcast a special requesting citizen collaboration. It was then that the offender's family saw the program and contacted the authorities. In this case, it was his wife who provided her husband's real name, describing him as an exemplary and calm person. She also stated that he had never shown violent attitudes towards his family. However, she offered a piece of information that would be key to Maturino's capture. He used to send her money and jewelry during his trips. Evidently, she did not know that all this belonged to the victims he murdered. On July 13th, 1999, at 9 a.m., after 3 days of negotiations between the FBI and his relatives, the murderer surrendered at a checkpoint. The fugitive crossed the border accompanied by his 2 brothers and a priest, and surrendered to a policeman in El Paso, Texas. Under harsh interrogation, Maturino provided details of 8 other murders, although he was only tried for the murder of Claudia Benton, whose trial began in May 2000 in Houston. During the trial, our protagonist presented himself as an immortal angel whose aim was to destroy abortion clinics and eliminate homosexuals. The court found him guilty on all charges and sentenced him to death by lethal injection. In an interview with him shortly before his death, he admitted to a further 10 murders, so that we can be talking about more than 25 murders. Before he breathed his last breath, the killer exercised his right to the last word. He asked for forgiveness for his actions and addressed the victims' families directly. He said the following words: "I want to ask you if it is in your heart to forgive me. It is not necessary. I know I allowed the devil to rule my life. I only ask you to forgive me, and I ask the Lord to forgive me. I don't deserve to cause you pain. You didn't deserve this. I deserve what I'm getting." The drugs were administered at 7:58 p.m. on June 27, 2006. Maturino was pronounced dead 7 minutes later, leaving behind a life of crime and evil. With this story, the need to address not only the symptoms of crime, but also its deep roots, such as lack of access to mental health care, poverty, child abuse, and other social and psychological factors, has been demonstrated. Here we end with the case of the railway killer. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the content. Best regards.